There are very few moments in Disney's history that are considered the definitive point that started a new era for the company that would forever change the way they manage their business. One of the most recent examples was back near the end of 2005, when Michael Eisner stepped down as CEO and gave his leadership position to his then second-in-command, Bob Iger. When he became in charge, the first issue Iger noticed that needed to be resolved was the company's animation division. Their main studio's movies were losing a lot of money, like Treasure Planet and Home on the Range. They had to close down all their other studios outside of California to just focus on producing computer animated features, and Pixar was ready to leave Disney after failing to make a good deal with Eisner. However, there was a solution that could fix most of Disney's animation problems. Not only did Bob completely bought out Pixar for $7.4 billion, but he made the heads at Pixar be also the heads at Disney Animation as well. Or should I now say, Walt Disney Animation Studios. The plan was to hopefully bring that same creative expertise and high morale that was in Pixar onto Disney, so that they could get back to making acclaimed animated movies. While the results were not immediate, it did start to show that it was working after the success of Bolt. But for how long could this plan work? Yes, you could get a few wins here and there, but would this be enough to surely put Disney back on top of the animation competition? Well, the only way to find out was to bring the studio back to its roots, back to adapting a classic fairy tale and giving that beloved Disney touch with traditional animation, which was exactly what they did by turning the Frog Prince into the Princess and the Frog. It's the story of Tiana, a waitress working in New Orleans non-stop to make her dream come true of opening her own restaurant. But just when those dreams seem to be dashed, a talking frog, who is actually the carefree Prince Naveen of Maldonia, asks Tiana to give him a kiss in the hopes to turn back into a human. Not only did it not work, but it completely backfired where now Tiana is a frog as well. So with the help of some new friends they meet along their journey, like a trumpet-playing alligator named Louis, Ray the Firefly, and a voodoo witch named Mama Odie, Tiana and Naveen go around the bayou to find out the secret of how to turn back into a human while avoiding the Shadow Man that turned Naveen into a frog in the first place, Dr. Facilier. When Ed Catmull and John Lasseter came in to lead Disney Animation as president and chief creative officer respectively, the first thing they wanted to fix was to reverse that decision of ending hand-drawn animation from a few years prior. In fact, they brought back many of the leading animators from Disney's Renaissance era to return to the studio, like Andreas Deja, Eric Goldberg, Bruce W. Smith, and the directing duo John Musker and Ron Clements. For those two, Lasseter wanted them to direct another feature with the story and medium of their choosing, and they knew that what Disney needed the most at the time was another traditionally animated Broadway-style fairy tale musical. The plan was to take two similar projects that both Disney and Pixar were making and combine them together in order to have their own interpretation of the Brothers Grimm's The Frog Prince. But of course, they would make this a little more different than the fairy tale people knew, including changing the setting from the usual Europe to New Orleans, and for the first time ever, feature a black Disney princess. And so, Disney officially revealed their project as The Frog Princess during their shareholders meeting in 2007, revealing some early concepts of what this film could potentially be. And people reacted the same way as they would to an alligator crashing a party on a riverboat.
It didn't end well.
Of course, there's nothing wrong with making an animated fairy tale movie starring African Americans, but the problem was how those African Americans would have been displayed in the movie. Here's the thing. They wanted to make an adaptation of The Frog Prince where the leading people of color turn into frogs, not to mention that the title of The Frog Princess could count as a slur to the French. Speaking of which, the princess of the story was a chambermaid named Maddie, and her prince wasn't even black. while the villain is an evil witch doctor that uses voodoo. That, and the fact that they announced that it would be set in New Orleans not long after Hurricane Katrina, which resulted most of the city's black residents to abandon their homes. Yeah, this concept needed some revisions. While not all of the criticisms were addressed and updated, Disney did change some of the more problematic elements a few months later, including turning the chambermaid Maddie into a waitress named Tiana and giving the movie a new title as The Princess and the Frog. They also brought in Oprah Winfrey to be a consultant of the film and be the voice of Tiana's mother, Eudora.
He used to go on and on about this old sugar mill too. Baby Cakes, I'm sure this place is going to be just wonderful. But it's a shame you're working so hard.
While faithfully adapting a fairy tale was never much of a concern for Disney, the team's goal with the movie was to take the well-known fable and make enough significant changes to make it feel like a brand new American story, yet still have the classic elements to feel like a fairy tale. The kingdom takes the form of early 20th century New Orleans to keep that sense of magic while having this feel more like an American story and giving the movie a central theme. The handsome prince is what the filmmakers described as a knuckle-headed playboy. There's a fairy godmother who's actually the nearly 200-year-old voodoo queen of the bayou. The evil sorcerer is a witch doctor that also uses voodoo. The leading princess is a hard-working, independent woman that was inspired by her voice actress Anika Noni Rose and renowned New Orleans restaurateur Leah Chase, and the love angle was given a deeper message of the perfect balance of finding someone to help discover what they truly need in order to find what they want in life. When the directors decided to go back to hand-drawn, the team at Disney were committed to bring it back in a way that really emphasized that the classic Disney style has finally returned. And when I say the classic style, I mean the ones that were heavily influenced by the craftsmanship of movies like Bambi, Lady and the Tramp, Sleeping Beauty, and 101 Dalmatians, where the artists and animators were not looking for realism, but instead to create a stylized look that could capture the feeling of what they wanted to present. This also applied to the designs of the characters and their movements, even bringing back the strong use of live-action references for the eccentric dancing sequences choreographed by Betsy Bedos. A good example of style over realism is with the frog forms of the leads, where they originally looked more like real frogs. Since frogs aren't necessarily the most attractive-looking creatures,
That's what you think, buddy.
Oh yeah, work it, frog, work it! Strike that pose, oh yeah!
they had to resort to a similar tactic used when the old animators had to design Jiminy Cricket from Pinocchio, where they only used minor aesthetics of the animal, like the shapes, so that audiences would believe that they are frogs mainly because they say so. Considering that it had been a while since they actually used the software, they couldn't just dust off the old cap system to animate with that again. Instead, they had to get a more modern version of caps called Toon Boom Harmony, which the animators first tested out by creating the 2007 Goofy short, How to Hook Up Your Home Theater. The only time Toon Boom wasn't used in the movie was for the Almost There number, where the Art Deco style was achieved using the Adobe software Photoshop and After Effects. Photoshop was also used in order to develop the backgrounds along with Maya to make 3D models of the buildings as references for the artists. For the music, John Lasseter knew exactly the man that would be perfect to bring that essential component of New Orleans onto the feature. The man who was raised in that city and the longtime Pixar composer, Randy Newman, where he mixed genres that define the music of the city like jazz, gospel, Zydeco, and have singer Dr. John sing the opening number down in New Orleans. As Disney was preparing to hype up the movie at the parks, they were ready to release the feature on Christmas Day 2009. However, they had to move that earlier to December 11th in order to avoid direct competition with Alvin and the Chipmunks The Squeakquel. And as audiences dug a little deeper to see Disney's hand-drawn comeback for themselves, the return was a success. Kind of. Well, at least with the critics it was. They found that it did brought back the classic Disney that everyone knows and loves, even if it might not be up to the same standards as some of the legends from the 1990s. But at the box office, that was where it performed only decently, making just $104.4 million domestically and $267 million worldwide. Definitely more than the recent failures they had, and Disney did consider it a success, but for the amount of hype they built up for this, it could have done much better, and there are two theories that explain why its performance was weaker than expected. One was because of the heavy amount of competition it had to face at the time, especially when it was up against the box office behemoth James Cameron's Avatar. And two was because of the title itself, specifically that it has the word princess on it, making the public believe that this movie's target audience would primarily be for little girls, despite the feature actually having an appeal for people of all ages and genders. As a result, most of Disney's animated films that follow contain a simple title that's gender neutral. However, despite the unimpressive results of its initial release, Tiana's impact with her movie turned out to be far greater than most Disney animated films released during that time. While not prominent in theaters, it definitely made a big name for itself during award season, collecting numerous of nominations and wins, including a Grammy nomination for Best Song Written for Visual Media with Down in New Orleans, a Golden Globe nomination for Best Animated Feature, 3 Oscar nominations for Best Animated Feature, and 2 for Best Song with Almost There and Down in New Orleans, and 8 Annie nominations, 3 of which won for Best Animated Effects, Best Character Animation for Eric Goldberg's work on Lewis, and Best Voice Acting for Jennifer Cody's performance as Charlotte. And as time moved on, the movie's popularity gradually climbed up to where the status is now ranked among the Disney classics, where Tiana is often considered as one of the most inspirational and strongest of the Disney princesses, and even Dr. Facilier is considered as one of the most memorable Disney villains. But most importantly, the reason why The Princess and the Frog grew into a beloved Disney favorite is because it offers something that is still considered very rare to find in an animated film: Black representation. Sure, Disney had people of color before, like Middle Easterns, Native Americans, and Asians, but for the first time, Black audiences can watch an animated film and see for themselves that Disney magic can happen to them too. It is still a very well-crafted movie that anyone can enjoy, but especially for the Black community, this feature has a special place in their hearts, and that it is their proof that dreams do come true in New Orleans. As Disney returned to bringing to life old fairy tales after more than a decade thanks to the new leadership, this opened the door to other features that were once abandoned, but now could earn a second chance to come out of its drawing board tower and present to the public its true potential. Which was exactly the case with a passion project that turned the story of Rapunzel into Disney's 50th animated feature, Tangled. It's about a young girl named Rapunzel, a princess who was kidnapped when she was a baby by Mother Gothel, who has ridiculously long hair with the power to heal and make people young again. On the eve of her 18th birthday, she managed to capture a thief in her tower called Flynn Rider, real name Eugene Fitzherbert, to which she made a deal with. She will accept to let him go and give him back the crown he stole from the kingdom, but only if he helps her live her dream by leaving the tower and see the sky lanterns up close that light up every year on her birthday. So now Flynn and Rapunzel head out to the kingdom to live her dream, all while Mother Gothel secretly knows that she's breaking her rules and do what she can to keep her royal identity remain hidden. The idea for this feature started all the way back in 1996, when animator Glenn Keane had an idea to adapt the story of Rapunzel while he was working on Tarzan. 5 years later, he finally pitched it to then CEO Michael Eisner, and he was happy to approve it. But on one condition: it had to be entirely computer animated. Keane wasn't sure if it would be possible to pull off his idea in CG, but he was up to the task. which then was put on production as Rapunzel Unbraided, set for a release in the summer of 2007. However, just as it was prepared to get things started, it was already setting off some creative clashes. On one hand, Glenn wanted to stay true to the source material in order to bring out the heart of the story. Michael, on the other hand, wanted a more Shrek-style movie where a girl from modern-day San Francisco gets transported into the fairy tale world. To Keen's credit, he did try to create Eisner's version, but he just couldn't make it work, and in early 2006, the project was scrapped. But as luck would have it, the new heads came to Disney just a week later and quickly put the project back in production. At that point, due to the previous issues, the movie was delayed to 2009, and the year after it got picked up again, story artist Dean Wellens joined Glenn as the director. However, on October of 2008, there had to be a switch. The directors agreed to step down due to their own reasons. Wellens committed to work on other projects, while Keen needed time to heal after having a heart attack during that year. In his place, Keen brought on board Byron Howard and Nathan Gretto straight after they finished their work on Bolt as director and storyboard director respectively. However, that didn't necessarily mean that Glenn was out of the project for good. He still wanted to be involved, especially on the visuals, which was why Keen still worked on the Rapunzel movie as an executive producer and as an animation supervisor. But even if he was no longer the director, he still had to take charge in one of the movie's most difficult tasks. Originally planned to be a 2D animated film, it took time for Keen and his team to debate and weigh in on both the pros and cons of hand-drawn and computer, since the latter was the only way for the executives to let them make this. And ultimately, they agreed on a plan to make the most with 3D while still keeping the core elements of Disney animation. Their goal was to implement the philosophies and aesthetics of the medium explained in Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston's book, The Illusion of Life, while giving the feature a style that is reminiscent to the 18th century Jean-Honoré Fragonard oil painting, The Swing. But before they could even open their computers and start animating, they had to settle on a good design for their characters first. As each was their own challenge to find the look that would suit them best, the most difficult of them all to find their perfect design was Flynn Rider. And no, it's not for the reason you may think.
They just can't get my nose right.
In order to establish Flynn's look, around 30 female employees at the studio all got together in what was known as the Hot Man Meeting, where they discussed, analyzed, and judged to what could possibly be the most attractive male lead to ever appear in a Disney film. After going through hundreds of drawings, celebrity comparisons, and breaking the spirits of their male co-workers by indirectly saying that some of their physical features are not attractive, they finally settled with the one design that ultimately became Eugene. As they adapted the Disney traditions of animation onto computer graphics, they also faced some unique challenges, especially with Rapunzel's signature hair. As it turned out, handling her 70-foot-long blonde hair that features over 100,000 individual strands was actually as difficult as handling a real head of 70-foot-long hair. This was why they brought in the help of software engineer Kelly Ward to help the animators understand the properties of hair, like how it moves and how it reflects on the light, along with assisting on the development of new software that helped give artists more control over Rapunzel's hair. The movie also tested the limits of the technology Disney had by maximizing the amount of elements they could feature in one scene, including having 45,000 lanterns for the I See the Light sequence and breaking the Hunchback of Notre Dame's record for the biggest crowd in a Disney animated film with over 3,000 people in the village. For the music, Alan Menken was reunited with Glenn Slater to create the songs that tried to blend folk rock from the 1960s and medieval music. Some of the numbers were completely different from what they became in the final film, including When Will My Life Begin going through 5 to 6 different versions, with one that was called What More Could I Ever Needed, and a love song called You Are My Forever that was meant to be sung by Mother Gothel and later by Eugene in a reprise, changed and was split into two with Mother Knows Best and I See the Light. After the lukewarm financial reception of The Princess and the Frog, Disney wanted to make sure that the title mistake would never happen again. So in the case of Rapunzel Unbraided, later titled to just Rapunzel, the studio took a step back from highlighting the princess of the feature, switching the title from Rapunzel to the more gender-neutral Tangled. The result caused quite a backlash, with many accusing Disney of sexism for hiding its female star. However, Disney, the directors, and the heads of animation defended this decision, stating that the movie was not just about Rapunzel. Removing the gender orientation in the title was meant to highlight that it's both Rapunzel and Flynn Rider's movie. With its ambitious technological achievement and long years of development, as of 2020, the movie holds the record for being the most expensive animated feature to make, with an estimated budget of a jaw-dropping $260 million. And when Rapunzel's movie life began on November 24th, 2010, all those years, all that money, all the drama with the name change, and all that hair really paid off. It was Disney's biggest animated hit since The Lion King, performing amazingly at the box office with $200.8 million domestically and a worldwide total of $592.5 million, where it even broke some records in several countries along the way. As for the critics, they were giving it some great praise, especially with how Disney's signature strong storytelling and beautifully crafted animation has returned with full force and brought into the realm of computer graphics. Maybe they didn't like everything about the movie, like the songs were not among Menken's best, but they still had a lot of fun with the film nonetheless. In fact, Time loved it so much that they even put it among their list of the 25 greatest animated films. Tangled even received several nominations, mostly for Best Animated Feature and for the song I See the Light, including an Oscar, 2 Annies, 2 Golden Globes, and 2 Grammys, winning one of them in the latter for Best Song Written for Visual Media with I See the Light. While it never received a legitimate feature-length sequel, even if the executives were really desperate for one, the movie did turn into a prominent franchise with several new stories and adaptations that expand the world of Tangled. There was a short called Tangled Ever After that appeared before the 3D screening of Beauty and the Beast, which presents how Maximus and Pascal go all around the kingdom to retrieve the ring for Rapunzel and Eugene's wedding, a stage adaptation at the Disney Cruise Line with 3 new songs, a level entirely themed to the movie in Kingdom Hearts 3, and an animated series called Rapunzel's Tangled Adventures, or just Tangled the series when it was on its first season. What started with the TV movie Tangled Before Ever After, it grew into a 5-time Daytime Emmy Award-winning show with 3 seasons and 60 episodes, featuring some of the cast from the movie reprising their roles like Mandy Moore and Zachary Levi, along with Alan Menken and Glenn Slater providing new songs and music. One of them, Waiting in the Wings, received the Emmy Alan needed to achieve his EGOT status. After numerous of attempts in the past, Tangled was the movie that truly brought Disney into the realm of computer animation. While the technology made to craft the feature was fresh, new, and often innovative, the movie's core remained true to the classic Disney traditions with a story filled with great action, humor, and romance, unforgettable songs, and characters that millions of people around the world can connect with. It was the movie that set a new standard for the studio as it entered the 2010 decade, where in the era that CG was dominating the industry, Disney was capable of making both critically and financially successful pictures that could be considered among the top standards of animated entertainment. In other words, Disney at last saw the light. The next year, Disney decided to not just go back to hand-drawn, but also to return to a beloved place the studio created 45 years prior. Considering that the company could no longer make any more of those direct-to-home media sequels, it was up to the team at Walt Disney Animation Studios to continue the legacy of Winnie the Pooh. The movie presents 3 different stories that are simultaneously happening and crossing over each other in the 100-Acre Woods. The first presents Pooh being very hungry, looking everywhere to find honey. The second is about Eeyore, who lost his tail. Since nobody knows where it went, Christopher Robin holds a contest for the best replacement for Eeyore's tail, with the winner receiving a pot of honey. And finally, the gang discovers a note from Christopher saying that he went out to school and that he will be back soon. Considering that nobody in the woods knows how to read, Owl misinterpreted the letter that Christopher Robin was kidnapped by an evil monster called the Baxen, and they all get together and prepare to catch it and rescue their dear friend. It all started back at the end of 2008, when John Lasseter wanted the studio to make a new movie that would be released in theaters featuring the beloved A.A. Milne characters. Technically, the franchise had no shortage of theatrically released Pooh movies at the time, but since Lasseter ordered Disney Toon Studios to stop producing any sequels and just focus on spin-offs like Tinkerbell, the only option Pooh had left for more movies was to go to the main studio. With Meet the Robinsons director Steven Anderson and story artist Don Hall taking the helm, they used all the help they could get to have a true understanding of what makes the stories and the characters so timeless and charming, including a research trip to the real 100-Acre Woods in Ashdown Forest, watching all the Pooh content Disney produced, and even brought in one of the key animators of Winnie the Pooh and Tigger 2, Bernie Madison, to be the lead storyboard artist and have him convince the executives to make the project a feature film instead of a short. Originally, the movie would have featured more stories from the A.A. Milne books, with 5 going on at the same time. However, the team had to ultimately cut it down to 3. One of them that almost got in the final cut would have involved Rabbit's friends and family. As the team tried to stay true to the heart of the source material and the iconic Disney brand, including bringing back prolific voice actor Jim Cummings to reprise his roles of Pooh and Tigger, and Travis Oates returning as Piglet, they also wanted to give the movie a fresh twist with the help of some notable actors that helped give some comedy that was new to the franchise, while keeping the integrity of the characters they played. These include John Cleese as the narrator, Craig Ferguson as Owl, Tom Kenny as Rabbit, and animation veteran Bud Luckey as Eeyore. Even for the animators, the characters were supervised by Disney's most elite traditional animators, like Mark Henn worked on Pooh and Christopher Robin, Andreas Deja did Tigger, Bruce W. Smith drew Piglet, Kanga, and Roo, Randy Haycock did Eeyore, Dale Bayer worked on Owl, and Eric Goldberg was in charge of Rabbit and the Baxen. One task that the directors knew was going to be tough was to find the right songwriters that could create something that would be in the league of what the Sherman Brothers did in the original featurettes. It took a bit of a search, but after hearing their demo, they knew that there was something special in Robert and Kristen Anderson Lopez, the songwriting couple that previously worked with Disney on the songs for the Animal Kingdom stage musical adaptation of Finding Nemo. Funny enough, they were able to create the 7 songs for the feature when they were at their worst state, mainly due to the fact that they could never have sleep because of their then newborn daughter Annie, along with trying to work while they were on a vacation from hell on Fire Island. This even helped out when writing the lyrics for the Baxen song.
You break your crayons. They spill your They wake up babies at 1 and 3.
This moment is also very fitting because Kristen also provided the voice of Kanga. At the same time, Zooey Deschanel also helped out with the music, writing the end credits song So Long, and performed a cover of the original Winnie the Pooh song with her music partner M. Ward. On its release of July 15, 2011, it was accompanied by an original animated short called The Ballad of Nessie. However, in some countries, instead of Nessie, they had the episode Cubby's Goldfish from Jake and the Neverland Pirates. But when it came to Pooh's return to Disney's main animation studio, the critics had a great time with it. In fact, they were loving almost everything about it, from the writing, to the voice acting, to the animation, to the musical numbers, stating that it was a very nice and heartfelt contrast to the usual energetic computer animated films and effects-filled blockbusters that were common at the time. The only thing that they complained about was that it was too short with a running time of just under 70 minutes. It even received a few nominations later on, including 8 Annie nominations and winning one of them for Best Storyboarding. At the box office, on the other hand, there was no amount of honey that could help make this even close to being considered a success. Despite having a relatively low budget of $30 million, it was only able to collect $26.7 million domestically and $50.1 million worldwide. And this was mainly, or debatably, all because it was released at the same time as Harry Potter. But not just against any Harry Potter film, it was Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, the last movie of the series, giving the public the most difficult decision of their movie-going lives. In the summer of 2011, they had to pick either the grand finale of the 10-year saga, where the boy wizard and his fellow students at Hogwarts face off against Lord Voldemort and his legion of Death Eaters in the ultimate battle of good and evil wizardry. Or they could watch Pooh and Friends fight Eeyore's tail. Come on, everybody. Let's see what funny things we can put on Eeyore's butt to make it seem like a tail. And who knows, maybe Pooh might find some honey along the way. Oh, let me tell ya, that summer was filled with tough decisions like this. But in all seriousness, the fact that this movie made over 10 times less than the last film was just downright embarrassing. Disney's original plan was to release a 2D animated feature once every 2 years, but partly due to Pooh's failure, the idea, while admirable, was ultimately scrapped. However, that wouldn't stop Disney from continuing the Winnie the Pooh legacy. In 2018, they released a live-action feature based on the classic characters called Christopher Robin, where Ewan McGregor played an adult version of the title character that focuses on his job a lot more than his family, who suddenly reunites with his old friends and returns to the 100-acre woods to reconnect with his inner child and remind him about what matters most. And just like before, the movie brought back Jim Cummings to voice Pooh and Tigger. The result actually turned out to be pleasant for Disney, and much better than the 2011 film by receiving some good reviews, $197.7 million at the box office, and an Oscar nomination for Best Visual Effects. In a way, Pooh's return to the studio that made him an animation icon was both for the best and for the worst. It unfortunately played a significant role in Disney quitting their attempt to maintaining hand-drawn animation in the mainstream, and made a fool out of themselves thinking that Winnie the Pooh could even compete against the last Harry Potter movie. But at the end of the day, they still created a charming feature that stayed true to the heart of the franchise and given a lot of love from their best artists and animators, along with making new friends that would later help them create bigger magic than anyone could ever imagine. And, at least for our story here, it is time to close the book on Winnie the Pooh, where one day, Disney will open it up again for a new generation to tell more stories with that silly old bear. Walt Disney Animation returned to becoming the studio that the public knew and loved by producing their own version of classic fairy tales and bringing back beloved characters like Winnie the Pooh, they never let go of their experimental side to bring their storytelling and animation skills to new levels that they've never tested before. In the case of their next feature, they would enter a realm that would seem like the opposite of their traditional timeless fantasy in the world of contemporary video games, with Wreck-It Ralph. It's the story of Wreck-It Ralph, the bad guy of the classic arcade game Fix-It Felix Jr., who is tired of being viewed as the villain that everyone resents both in and out of his own game. So, to prove them wrong and show that he deserves to be treated with respect, he sneaks out to a more modern game called Hero's Duty to grab a medal, which in his game is a symbol rewarded to those who did a good deed like beating a level. He may have gotten the medal, but it didn't go as well as planned, since he then lost it at a racing game called Sugar Rush. Now with the help of a glitched out character named Vanellope von Schweetz, Ralph helps her get into the race so that he could get his medal back before he indirectly wrecks Sugar Rush and his own game. For a while, Disney always wanted to try to create a movie themed to video games. In fact, it had been since the late 1990s that they had developed concept for a movie called either High Score or Joe Jump. But it never got off the ground because executives believed that there was something missing with its main character. Something that would make audiences invested to join them on their big adventure. It wouldn't be until years later when John Lasseter was interested in developing a video game movie, one that wouldn't need to be chained to the Disney style and focus more on having its own identity. And John knew the perfect outsider to help bring this movie to life. For the director, he hired television animation veteran Rich Moore, who previously directed some acclaimed episodes which Lasseter highly admired from shows like The Critic, Futurama, and The Simpsons. After teaming up with writers Jennifer Lee, Jim Reardon, and Phil Johnston, they all created the plot of a video game character leaving his game to find a greater purpose. But there were still a few things that they needed to change in order for the story to be better. One was to find a new lead. It originally starred Fix-It Felix Jr., who didn't want to be a part of the fixing family business and leave his game to find a place where he can feel like he can belong. However, when they started to create the villain called Wreck-It Ralph that was this garbage-throwing beast-like brute, they realized that there was a lot more potential with him than on Felix, and decided to change up the script so that it would be more about Ralph. Another update they had to make was removing a scene that was set in a game called Extreme Easy Living 2, a social media game in the style of The Sims and Grand Theft Auto. While the scene was mapped out and storyboarded, they had a hard time to figure out how they could fit that game in the arcade world, so they ultimately had to scrap it, even if removing it was a tough decision for them. However, while they had the basics settled, there was another component they had to add that would be another star element of the film: the cameos. Just like how Who Framed Roger Rabbit was for cartoons and how Toy Story was for toys, they wanted to fill the world of the feature with recognizable video game characters in order to help make the gaming world feel more believable. These games where their characters appear in Wreck-It Ralph include Street Fighter, Sonic the Hedgehog, Altered Beast, Pac-Man, Mortal Kombat, sort of, but not really, Dance Dance Revolution, Burger Time, Tapper, Paperboy, Pong, Dig Dug, Frogger, Kix, Q*bert, and that doesn't even count all the little references. But even with the large quantity of familiar faces, not everyone they wanted to get ended up in the final film. According to some screenshots, Dr. Wily from Mega Man was supposed to be a part of the Bad Anon meeting, but ended up getting cut. And there were rumors suggesting that Mario and Luigi didn't make it because Nintendo was charging too much for their license, which was why they could only include Bowser. In actuality, Disney did have the chance to have Mario in, but they decided not to because they couldn't find a way to include him in a scene where his appearance wouldn't take the attention away from the story, and ended up only mentioning him by name.
I'll bet that's Mario. Fashionably late, per the norm.
I'm sure many gamers are disappointed to hear about that, but hey, look on the bright side. At least the movie got Skrillex. He's not a gaming character, but he's there for some reason. But not all the characters were made to be video game oriented. In the case of King Candy, his voice and animation style were inspired by the performance of Ed Wynn as the Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland.
Of course not. This is an unbirthday party.
You wouldn't hit a guy with glasses, would you? You hit a guy with glasses. That's well played.
When creating the world of the individual games, the animators were given a specific shape to focus on in order to help make them. On Fix-It Felix Jr., as a retro 8-bit game, there is a big theme of squares while keeping the design simple. Also, with the exception of Ralph and Felix, the characters can only move on a grid to maintain that 8-bit style motion, meaning that never once could they make a diagonal pose. For Hero's Duty, the point is to make the area an unpleasant Halo-style place that's highly dangerous, and even wearing some massive armor could only barely get you out alive if you're lucky. Which was why the animators focus on triangles to make everything seem sharp and nowhere can be considered safe. And finally, for Sugar Rush, as it is a candy-themed racing game, circles were the way to go to make the environment look pleasant, welcoming, and vibrantly colorful, even taking inspiration from the architecture of Antoni Gaudi. Also, to additionally help them create the backgrounds of Sugar Rush, visual development artist Brittany Lee created a model of the world made out of candy and cookies, along with the team studying a lot of candy to understand how they can work in the world. They even created new software for the light to correctly reflect upon the many different types of candy in the environment. As Disney was marketing the feature in a similar style of a game, like promoting it at E3, they were ready to press start on November 2nd, 2012, where it was accompanied with the animated short Paperman. And that film alone gathered massive praise and even won the Oscar and the Annie for Best Animated Short, making it Disney's first Academy Award for that category since 1969. And best of all, some of that praise even went to Wreck-It Ralph. The critics were highly enjoying the feature, saying that while the recognizable cameos are fun, it was the originality of Ralph's adventure that made the movie awesome for everyone. It was also a solid hit at the box office, earning a domestic gross of $189.4 million and a worldwide total of $471.2 million. Ralph was also a smash during award season, where it got several wins and nominations along the way, like an Oscar and a Golden Globe nomination for Best Animated Feature, 10 Annie nominations, winning half of them for Best Music, Best Voice Acting for Alan Tudyk's performance as King Candy, Best Writing, Best Directing, and Best Animated Feature. And it even got some recognition on IGN's Best of 2012 awards, where it got 5 nominations and winning 2 of them for Best Animated Feature and People's Choice for Best Animated Feature. But of course, as a video game-inspired movie, Ralph also got himself in several video games, and I don't just mean his own tie-in game. Disney made a playable version of Fix-It Felix Jr., including actual arcade cabinets like in the movie, online and mobile video games, and being a playable character in Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed, Disney Infinity, and Disney Crossroads. They even made a mockumentary-style parody of the King of Kong called Garland Hulse, Where Potentials Live, in order to promote the home media release. After already establishing that they have returned with their traditional timeless formula and proving that they were still capable of creating movies that could be among the ranks of their classics, Wreck-It Ralph presented that Disney finally got their experimental side right, where they could explore more contemporary concepts and earn great results that make them a worthy addition to Disney's animation collection. Disney was off to a great start in the 2010 decade, but little did they know that the best was yet to come.
Queen Elsa of Arendelle.